Awesome. Okay. Right. Well, let's begin then. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining today's webinar, all about content marketing and B2B email. We've got two excellent speakers lined up for you today, and there's an opportunity for a Q&A afterwards. So as the talk progresses, if a question pops into your head, please just pop it in the chat or message me directly and I'll queue them up. Quick reminder, we're recording the session today and we'll be hosting it on our website afterwards. So first up, we've got Steve Harlow. Steve is the Chief Sales Officer at Sopro. He's been here since the very beginning and has played a huge role in steering the company to where it is today. There is literally nothing he doesn't know about B2B email outreach and how to create the perfect prospecting campaign. After Steve, we'll move on to discuss content marketing with Catherine Strachan. Catherine is the MD of Copyhouse, a content marketing agency specializing in technology and fintech content. Catherine also runs several SEO and copywriting workshops and training courses, including the acclaimed 11-week Ultimate SEO and Copywriting course. That's the creds out the way. So without further ado, I'll pass over to our first speaker. Steve, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rich. I'll share my screen so you can see all my slides that I've put together for you. Don't worry, there's not loads of slides, just more some background stuff that I'm going to talk upon. Interestingly, we actually had this webinar set up the other way around where I would follow Catherine, but looking at the subjects we're talking around, probably makes sense for me to go first and talk about getting people into that funnel, and then Catherine will talk about how to guide them through the funnel to hopefully a closed deal. So yeah, as Rich says, I've been with Sopro as a business since the beginning, and I am a huge user of our service, so I know everything we've learned in regards to B2B emailing, and just want to share some of our insights with you today so that you can put some of them into practice if you are doing some prospecting yourself, and I'll also define what prospecting is. So first thing to talk about, emails. As a whole subject, should I be sending emails? Now, I'll put together a detailed graph there to explain the do's and don'ts of emails, of what you should do. And the answer is yes, or yes in red. The simple answer when it comes to email conversion is that it is pretty much the #1 channel of money in to money out on any sort of marketing activity. So as you can see there, it says it's every £1 spent, you get about £42 back. That's a study by DMA back in 2019. So it's really a no-brainer. You know, there's lots of forms of emails you can send, some of which will be spoken by Catherine. But I'm going to talk to you, as I mentioned, about the top of the funnel, the prospecting part, to really kickstart and engage those conversations. You'll probably hear or probably tell a lot from my talk that we're pretty passionate about emails and the use of them in the prospecting funnel. First definition, what is prospecting? It's a term very familiar to me, to Rich, people involved with Sopro, and some people are aware of it, but it's not a particularly widely used term. So you might think of it more as a sales initial outreach. It's a bit like a digital version of telesales. Whichever way you are looking to cold start conversations with people, you could knock at the door of somebody's house or business. You could be picking up the phone and trying to ring people, or you could send things through the post. You've got digital versions like email or LinkedIn, but prospecting is that process of identifying a person that you want to engage with and reaching out to start that engagement. So for Sopro, we do prospecting via emails. We have to find relevant business owners, relevant heads of marketing, sales directors, anyone we feel is relevant to speak to for ourselves anyway. And then we go out saying, hey, this is Sopro, this is what we do. So prospecting is outbound. It's finding your audience and not being invasive, probably the wrong term, but reaching out directly to them rather than waiting for them to come to you. So what I'm going to talk through, as mentioned, are things that we've learned that work and don't work when it comes to sending out prospecting emails. And there's a number of factors at play when you think about that funnel. You need to, first off, get people to read your emails. You want to get them to respond, and you want them to get them to respond positively. And even before then, you need to make sure you're targeting the right people. So how I'm going to start this is assuming that you have a nice list of people in businesses, valid email addresses. You know the individuals you want to reach out to. I say individuals would be B2B. You're aware of that, and you now need to go, right, what am I going to write to them? What am I going to say? This is where we're going to start my talk. And the first thing is, of course, looking at subject line. Now, when an email lands in the inbox of a potential business owner or marketing director or whoever it is, we'll call them prospects. When it lands in their inbox, they are going to make a decision whether that even gets opened. And actually, the inbox will make a decision whether it even lands in the inbox. You know, your email could go straight to spam. And most of the defining factor for that could be how you send the email, your domain reputation. But one thing that plays a big part is the subject line. And a lot of email providers or email browsers, they are quite well versed at spotting what looks like a spam email. You'll notice in your Gmail email, if you use Gmail inbox, you've got primary, you've got social, you've got the promotions. And that's because they're able to look at the email and go, okay, that's from LinkedIn, it's a social email. That's a newsletter promotion, it's talking about discounts, and it'll put them into, take them out of the primary inbox. So one of the things we've learned from the millions of emails we've sent out is how to write your email, things to not put in there, but also not just about what's in there, but the length of them. So on the left-hand side, you can see they're all quite long subject lines. They're trying to almost oversell the reason that you should open it. 3 days left, final deadline this Thursday. A little emoji. Oof. You know, if you saw that subject line land in your inbox, delete. You know, maybe just move it across to spam or an actioned inbox. You're unlikely to look at it. Say yes to a 30% discount. Doesn't feel very personalized. Capital letters in there, just a cheap trick to try and draw your attention in. And then the last one there, it's a bit more natural, but it feels a bit vague and it's quite long. It feels like it's trying to tell you too much about what the content of that email is. Whereas if we look on the right-hand side, how to get it right, there are short subject lines. They are clear about the action we want to take, which is to talk to them. We want to intro ourselves. We want to set up a meeting. It doesn't give away what we want to talk to them around, but it is honest about the action. And then there's also personalization points in there. The company name. So it could be, coffeehouse/Sopro meeting. Brief intro to Sopro, putting someone's name in there, not just the company name, but their first name, that can work quite well as well. And what this should do is get people to at least open that email and read what you want to, or what the content of that email is and why you might want to speak to them. So the first barrier, subject line, keep it short, to the point, don't use loads of words, personalize it where you can, and don't make it look like an obvious marketing email, because people just won't open and they won't read it, and falling at the first hurdle. So they've opened the email, hopefully. We're now into the part where they're going to read it. And this is really make or break in terms of, are you going to get a high response rate to your emails, or are you going to get ignored by most people that see it? As soon as you open up an email, you scan it with your eyes. The attention span of humans is ever shrinking, and actually a study by Microsoft shows that I think the average attention span is about 8 seconds now. So we're very much looking at things, and if it doesn't grab our attention straight away, we're on to the next subject or on to the next task of what we're doing. So the email will arrive in their inbox if they look at it and they look at two things really. They go, do I think this is sent to me? Is it specifically sent on a one-on-one basis? And is it of the length that I'm happy to read right now? If you try and write War and Peace, they're not going to sit there and go, okay, I'm going to spend 5 minutes of my day reading an email that I've no idea what it's about. So it needs to be of a sensible length, and it cannot look like it's a marketing type email. Give you an example, if you've got pictures in there, if you've got a beautifully designed HTML template, that smacks straight away of marketing. And marketing emails you can ignore. And the reason being is that that marketing email has likely been fired out to a list of people, and you're not upsetting a person. Whereas an email like this, and I'll go through in a bit more detail, it feels as though Stephen, that's me, has actually written directly to you as a person. And you then feel a bit more obliged to at least give it a read, but also you feel more obliged to reply to that person, even if it's to say thanks but no thanks. Simple analogy, you don't thank the self-service machine at Tesco. Maybe you do, but generally, if you're interacting with anything machine-based, it's transactional, whereas we want to keep it very personal. So that's the idea of the length. You'll see it's only got a few paragraphs. You cannot sell your product or service in an email. That's never going to happen. What you can do, though, is sell the concept of a conversation. So you want to give them information about why you contacted them to start off with. You then want to go through who you are and what you do and why you think you might be able to help them. And you always need to finish with a close, because if you don't trigger an action, then nothing will come of it. And typically a close will be you want to get on a call, or you want to set up a meeting, or well, meetings not so much these days. Hopefully June 21st we'll be back to doing those, but you might want to set up video conference, or you might even be inviting them to an event. What you'll see in that template there is lots of green, what we call personalization parameters. And that, again, is to make it feel one-to-one when the person's reading it. Simple things like mentioning morning or afternoon. If it's sent in the morning, it says good morning, feels like someone sent it. Talking about the day, it's a busy Wednesday, so I'll keep this introduction brief. Company name, yeah, you want to mention that you're trying to reach out to that specific company. The middle one you'll see there, informal company industry. Now that's really a SoPro specific thing, but something you could do as well. If you think about the data you might have on all of these prospects, you'll have somewhere in the company column the business name, and you'll have the industry. And let's say, for example, well, in this case, we're talking about a software company. On LinkedIn, that business will be under computer software, and it could be labeled as Innertech Software Solutions PLC. So if you've got that information going into an email, that's going to read, it's not going to feel particularly natural. Whereas what we do is we'll take that company name and we'll go, right, we don't need to have Software Solution PLC. The brand name's Innertech. So Innertech is how we will refer to them. And in terms of the company industry, computer software, well, a lot of software is on computers, so I don't think that's really necessary. So let's just talk about them being in the software space. So we tidy those parameters up. And then on the right-hand side, you can see how that looks in real terms. So it's got morning, Peter. It's a busy Monday, so I'll keep this introduction brief. But I thought Innertech might find the risk-free way of growing sales offered by sales.uk really useful. And then in the third paragraph, we've proven popular with many in the software space. So rather than computer software, or even worse, information and technology services, which is another one on LinkedIn, it needs to feel natural. So if you do have the time, it does make sense to make sure that any of the personalization points you're sending in your emails, the data that's going to pull through, it looks natural. And then the close there, it's making it, or the days that we're pulling through for that close are different depending on when we send that email. If your close for every single email says, oh, it'd be great to jump on a call this week, and that email goes out at 11:30 on Friday, it doesn't feel right, because the week's pretty much almost over, and not many people will book in a call with you from cold within a couple of hours of you making contact. So therefore, in this example, the FF weekday +2, if that went out today, that would say Friday, and the +3 would say Monday. Tomorrow, that will say Monday or Tuesday, and it just adds in that extra layer of feeling natural. Now, you can't go overboard with personalization. If you put company name in there too often, it's going to feel a bit disingenuous, but adding personalization is really important, but make that personalization informalized so that it also flows well in an email template. The follow-up, I'd really call them chasers, are really, really important in this scenario. If we think back to prospecting, if you are a double glazing salesperson, you rock up to a house with awful looking windows and you think, I'm going to sell these people some better windows, then you'll knock on the door. If they don't answer, you don't go, oh, that's a give up, sale done. You would return the next day, or you would, maybe cycle back on your loop the next week. Same if you're making phone calls, and any email is no different. If you're trying to get in touch with the people at Innotech, you genuinely think you can help them. If they don't respond to your first email, you're going to send a follow-up. And statistically, we generally follow a chain of 4 emails. The second and third emails in that 4 email chain produce the highest percentage in terms of the response rate and lead rate. I think the third email is the number 1 performing, and then the first is third and fourth kind of drops off. And we often get asked about why do we send 4? And that's simply down to the stats showing us that the longer you go in a chain, the lead or the interest goes down and the irritation goes up. So, you've got to find that balance that you don't know these people, you are cold approaching them, and therefore you've got to be relatively respectful. And what we also have in the final email, the fourth one, it lets them know it's the last time you're going to approach them. So if they are interested, they can then make contact and you can start a conversation. I tell you what we do, we have something generally pretty funny in our final email, because at least it can make someone laugh. There are people out there who don't like to laugh, unfortunately, but they're few and far between. So it's a nice way to end the chain. But we've had people either give really polite declines at that point, or it's triggered them to be interested. They've gone, I love the style. This could work for me. Let's talk. So the example here is what we'd call a first chaser. You're not going into detail. You're not trying to completely resell the concept of speaking. Maybe add in there a little bit of a reason that they should want to speak to you. But it's good morning, afternoon, got in touch a few days ago or a week ago, just giving you a nudge in case it got buried, which, as we know, could well happen. Hoping to schedule 5 to walk you through the model. Any good time to speak later this or early next week. That's another one of our close parameters, which, depending on which half of the week it goes out, will depend on what that close will say. So if it's a Thursday or Friday email, it could say maybe we could speak early next week. With the follow-ups, one important thing to aim to do is to have them forwarding on the original email. So you don't want it to be a whole standalone email that goes out. You want it to appear that you've gone into your Outlook or your Gmail, you've dug up the original email you sent, and you re-forwarded it on to that person as a genuine chase. Again, it just makes it feel natural, and that person then feels more obliged to respond, even if it's to say thanks, but no thanks. So yeah, don't be afraid to send follow-ups. They are so valuable. And what you'll see if you set up a system like we have, where you have regular outbound emails going out as fresh prospecting. So, you're contacting maybe 30, 40, 50, 60 people fresh every day. When you start to add those chasers in, you'll see that the volume of emails that goes out each day will start to increase. So if you're doing the initial email daily, as you head into week 2, you're chasing the people from day 1, and then the next day you're chasing people from day 2, so that they've all got about the same gap between the first and second send, and you do something similar for the third and fourth email. But as we get into week 4/week 5, we've gone from maybe 63 emails a day to over 260 emails per day. It won't be an exact multiple, because you'd hope that some people would reply, but for everyone that doesn't, send those chasers, and then they'll get the final one. And if they don't reply at that point, I think it's fair to say that you can leave them be for 6 to 9 months. But when we're at week 4, 5, 6, 7, you've got a consistent flow of a pretty worthwhile volume of emails going out, and you'll see that the replies, or the amount of replies and leads coming through, will also be quite high at that point. So the lead rate will continue to increase. And the common sense, the more emails you send, if you're keeping a quality, then the more conversations that will come back. But also think about how you're going to handle those responses. If you are sending too many in a short period of time, so for example, you try and hit all those people in one day, you might get overwhelmed with the responses. And if you don't reply to people quickly, then you could lose the opportunity. And actually, how to follow up with the responses is a whole nother session we can go through. more emails you send, the more responses you're going to get, but try and make it so that you layer it up nicely and then have a regular flow of responses coming through. Just want to touch briefly on how we compare, just to finish off, how prospecting compares with other marketing channels. Now, I tend to split them into two areas. You've pretty much got inbound and you've got outbound. And realistically, email in that list is your outbound, and all the rest are predominantly inbound routes. So you probably hear the term content marketing being bandied around all the time. Got to have content, got to have content. And I'm sure you're also aware of people on LinkedIn where you see them posting maybe daily videos and having what looks like zero engagement. Content marketing is a fantastic route to market if you do it right. But you can spend a lot of time making poor content. They're not really working. But social media, looking at your audiences, optimizing in terms of people finding you on Google and the search engine optimization, paying on your AdWords PPC, paying for the clicks and hopefully converting on your website. Literally the state of your website, is it highly converting? It's all about having something that brings people towards you. Whereas with prospecting, you're going out with your message to them. We as a 2015 we began, and we're now 2021, grown from 3 people to approximately 150, and that is continually moving because we're essentially doubling in size every single year. We don't just use prospecting as a lead source, and I would absolutely encourage everyone to follow suit. There's not one channel that does it for everyone, but even today, it's about 35 to 40% of our total leads come through our prospecting, and we've added in the other channels. And a lot of the other channels, they take time to build up, so your SEO. So in terms of, if I was a newer business and I didn't have a huge amount of budget, prospecting would be my first go-to route. If you're newer as well, people are less likely to have heard of who you are and what you do, so you haven't got a name that necessarily is going to bring people in. So you can set up outbound activity as your outbound work. You get to define your audience, which is really important. So you can say, I want to go out to people in this location. I want to contact people who are in this role or this level of seniority in these kind of businesses. So you know who you're going out to should or could potentially be an interested person, and then you can deal with the responses. That's something you can't quite do with the other channels in terms of with PPC and AdWords. You put your advert out there to ideally attract your ideal customer, but who knows who clicks on it. And from our own experience, you get people that are in mid-sized businesses looking to find out about lead gen and prospecting services. But we also get maybe some companies that aren't even formed yet, and they're about to launch a business. They've not really got any budget, and they're not really ideal customers for us. So the outbound and inbound, it's good to have a blend, but outbound is a much more cost-effective way to start generating leads. And then your inbound, if you're getting an agency to do your PPC, it's very expensive, but the rest of it will build over time. So that it should sit within a healthy marketing mix if you're using it right. And that brings my part of this to a close. So I will hand back to Richard, or hand straight over to Catherine.
That's great. Thanks, Steve. Really good stuff in there. We've got a few questions as well, which I'll message you directly and get some answers for. Okay. But we can hand over to you now, Catherine, if you want to take it away and talk us through content marketing.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let me just get my slides up here. Can you see my screen okay, Rich?
Absolutely. Yep. Looks good.
Great. Welcome. So my name is Catherine Strachan. I am Managing Director at Copyhouse. Copyhouse is a content marketing agency specializing in technology and fintech. So we work with brands predominantly in these spaces to help them with their content. And one of the really beautiful things about content is that it is so flexible that it can underpin all activities that you do, and should definitely connect with your sales campaign. So what I'm going to be talking about today is kind of content that's a bit further down the funnel and can connect and help support some of your email outreach efforts. So yes, I'm Catherine Strachan, Managing Director at Coffee House. And as I explained, we work with technology and fintech brands to help them, drive conversions and create meaningful content. So most tech brands and most B2B brands have very long sales cycles. So the time between when you get that initial email of somebody expressing interest in your business to the time that they actually close and sign a contract and start working with you can be quite a wait. Depends on your company, but in the tech space at least, you're normally looking at 6 to 9 months, sometimes 3. I know for my own agency, it's normally about 60 days from the first touch point, so the first time that they hear about us to when they close. So if you're thinking about that and you're thinking about, okay, well, it's going to take at least 2 to 9 months for something to close, how are you going to support them through that process? So can't be, emailing them all the time. So how are you going to nurture that relationship so that they get to trust you, so that they get to understand the value of what you can offer and ultimately convert? Yes, so that is a question. If the average B2B sales cycle is 180 to 270 days, how are you going to keep prospects engaged at scale? So without lots of boots on the ground, without a massive sales team who can, be doing lots of lunches and, making sure to follow up with them every single week and all of that, how are you going to engage with them at scale? Content marketing is a really great way to do that because content can sit across the funnel. So content sits at the very top. It helps generate awareness and interest. It sits in the mid funnel, so that's around consideration and intent. So, by the time that you have that first sales call, they're normally mid funnel, but then you need to nurture them through the late stage, which is evaluation and purchase. And then even after they become new client or new customer, continuing that relationship, making sure that they have the best possible experience they can possibly have with your company, also takes some content. So at the top stage, you might have thought leadership articles, you might have social media posts and videos, you have your SEO optimized website, which, as Steve mentioned, does take some time, but is still an essential part of a marketing. And then in the awareness stage, so after you have that initial call, it's very likely that they might ask you for some case studies or for some examples of the work that you've done. They might also be interested at that point to signing up to a newsletter and receiving informational, educational, not spammy, newsletter content from you. And, then when they do purchase, post conversion emails. So, making sure that they're onboarded and that they're having a good experience, and also, product guides so that they can navigate their way around, your new product or your new tech solution. So there's been some really interesting research into the types of content that perform the best at these different stages. So this is actually done by CMI, not me. And what it shows is that case studies, is one of the highest, apart from in-person events, which we can't do at the moment, is one of the highest, best converting pieces of content you can create. Webinars and online events, and there's lots of content that goes around that. Slightly up the funnel, you have the newsletter and the blog post that I was talking about, case studies again. So I'm going to talk about some of these individual pieces of content today. So the first one that we're going to be talking about is case studies, because case studies are top performing piece of content for both nurturing and converting leads. It's a massive mistake to not have them on your website, and not only not have them, but to be constantly updating them, because you're constantly working on new projects, you're constantly working with new customers, and it's important that you create social proof to kind of show and demonstrate how your approach or your service is tried and tested. It decreases perceived risk, it builds loyalty and trust, and gets people to ultimately convert. It also showcases what makes you special and unique. So by the time somebody comes to read a case study, they are not deciding if they need a certain service. They are deciding if you are the right person to deliver that service for them. So what makes you different from all the other market options out there? And without case studies, without content that is like further down the funnel in that regard, it's very hard to explain that. And you might explain that on a call, but there's often, especially in B2B, going to be other people involved in that decision-making process. So they might not hear it directly from the horse's mouth. So it's important for them to have other ways to kind of confirm and testify that you are the real deal, so to speak. So I'm going to run you through some best practices for creating case studies now so that you can create them yourself. So most case studies follow a similar narrative, as in that they talk about the problem, and then they talk about the brief or the solution. So what was the idea? How were you going to fix this problem? And then what was that process? So what challenges did you face? How did you overcome those challenges? And then finally, what results did you see? So what was, the meaningful impact that you had on that business? How did you, rock their world, so to speak? And this is, the structure that you really want to follow so that you create that narrative and paint that picture, that story of what happened. So when it comes to creating case studies, the first step really is to gather all the necessary information. So, if it's a big project, there might be information out there like press releases or reports, making sure that you have all of that that's already been created, even if it wasn't created as a case study. So perhaps it was in the news or whatever. Gathering that information is the first step. And then once you've done that, you can conduct interviews with key stakeholders. So normally we interview the person on our client side, so within the business, and the person on the other side, so their customer or their client, so that we can create a well-balanced picture. We can tell a story that contains both sides of the equation. And then, once you have all those insights, you can create a first draft using the framework that I just talked about. And then, of course, you polish and refine. And at that point, it's important to share the case study with the stakeholders so that they can sign it off. You don't want your case study to go live without your customer having seen it. So you get any additional feedback, and then, you should be good to go. So it is important. One of the reasons why we interview both sides is because otherwise, if you're only creating it from within your business, you're only showcasing why you think you're great. And, while that is awesome, there's another side to that story, and you need to validate it by including your customer's thoughts and sayings. So it's much more potent if you're including their thoughts, because it's not just you saying that you're awesome, it's your customer saying that you're awesome as well. When you create case studies, it's important to think about the areas within your business that you want to establish expertise, and then create case studies within those areas. Ideally want to create a mixture of case studies covering all the different areas in your company, so that when somebody says, "Can I see a case study on X?" you can deliver a case study on X and help convert that. Most case studies are rather short, so they're ideally around 800 words. You should also make them quite easy to find on your site. So one of the mistakes I see people make as well is that they give it some abstract random name that isn't commonly used when they put it on their menu, or they don't even put it on their menu, and it makes it very hard for prospects to navigate to those case studies from your homepage. So there's a little bit of a debate around case studies and whether or not they should be gated or public. So should they be, open source, or should they be gated so that you have to enter your email address and your details in order to download them? I'm not really sure that there's a right answer here, though I would, if you do the gated route, I would create some public ones as well, because not everybody might be ready to give you their personal information to download a case study. So if you do go the gated route, make sure that you still have some public ones, and you can do a mixture of both is probably the best approach in this case. So the next thing I want to talk about, the next piece of content I want to talk about are called meeting leave behinds. So this is kind of the collateral that you might leave behind or send over by email after that first sales meeting. So say you've had a successful SoPro campaign and you've gotten lots of leads in and you're having lots of meetings. What happens after that meeting? So leave behind meeting materials are a really great way for you to stay top of mind after that call to, gives you something to send over, to touch base with. These might be things like a product brochure, might be a digital magazine of, showcasing your work, might be cred sheets, quite often, quite normal, quite common in the agency world. It might even be the pitch deck. So these are collateral that is going to sell your organization to people who weren't there, that's going to help educate people on why they should use you, ease any worries that they might have, and hopefully ultimately get them to convert. So meeting leave behind, it's going to help you stay top of mind and front of center. It gives you another way to touch base with them after the call. And rather than just being like, oh, hey, like, did you think about this? Being, giving them something valuable. So, hey, forgot to leave this with you. Hope that you, enjoy our digital magazine or whatever it is that, you're sending over. It also helps sell you to people who are not on the call. So especially in B2B, your first point of contact is very unlikely to be the only person in that decision-making process. So it gives that person ammo that they can take to their boss, that they can say to their boss or whoever holds the purse strings, look, I found this really great company. They do X, Y, and Z. I want to get them in to help us with this problem. And then hopefully, that's enough for them to say yes. And it also starts to integrate you into the organization, gives them something to think about, to talk about. And then you become more of a known entity. And, obviously known entities are considered safer, less risk, and, hopefully gets them to want to make you a part of their daily lives or their weekly lives, however you engage with clients. So when creating a meeting leave behind, which can take many different forms, so these are top level best practices that you'd want to follow. So you want it to have an engaging headline so it grabs their attention immediately. You want to provide relevant personalized information. You don't want, very long text, similar to the idea of not wanting to send over, a massive email and keeping it short and snappy. Same idea here, because that makes it easy to skim read, to find the relevant sections. It's always nice when it's a healthy balance between design and copy so that, it's eye-catching, it's appealing, people want to engage with it. This is a great place to integrate some of those mini case studies, mini success stories. And you might also want to provide additional contact details like your phone number. So how can they reach you if they want to get started today? So next, and finally, I want to talk about guides and long form content. So I definitely have a soft spot for long form content, and perhaps it's because it's so flexible and it fits across every single stage of the funnel. So that same research that we looked at earlier, 31% use it for brand awareness, 13% to secure leads, another 13% to nurture leads, and 11% to convert leads. So long form content should and does fit across the whole funnel, and is pretty important, I think, in the marketing mix. So long form guides, these can be thought leadership articles, it can be trends and topical articles, evergreen SEO articles that help you rank for certain strategic keywords, news and press releases about what's happening in your company and, anything that you want to promote. And even, if you're doing an event, it's a really good idea to do an article off the back of that event that captures thought leadership insights and gives your event a bit more shelf life. So there are lots of things that you want to do right when you create guides and long form content. But these are some of like the big ones for me at least. So you want to make sure that whatever content you create aligns with your customer avatars. So it aligns to those people that you're having sales calls with. Who are they? What do they care about? What are their pain points? And what's keeping them awake at night? And then how can you solve that problem for them? It's, you know, it allows you to create meaningful content by adding to existing content gaps. So I never really believe in creating the same thing that everybody else creates. It's 1,000 times better to find a really unique angle and stand out from the crowd and create something that has original thoughts or stats or research and, you know, helps grab prospects' attention and kind of teach them about why you're so educated in this space and why you're the perfect company for them to work with. So, you know, remaining focused on who you're talking to and who's going to actually be reading that piece of content, which often means, you know, avoiding jargon and long sentences and dry language, because, yeah, almost nobody likes that. You then also align it with sales. So long form content should interact with your sales team and make their jobs easier. So what sort of information do prospects need to know before speaking to somebody in your sales team? How can you get them to go from kind of interested to actually speaking to you? And then when they are speaking to you, what are the most common questions or hesitations that your sales team hears? So say you have an introductory chat off the back of, you know, one of the emails, and you're getting, you know, certain hesitations or concerns. You can say, hey, I have this really great article that explains this in depth. Let me send it over to you. You can share it with your boss, and we can go from there. And that kind of helps give you space so that you can thoroughly explore and explain, you know, why that hesitation is false. In terms of questions too, I mean, if you're getting prospects that are asking certain questions, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There will be lots of people out there who are not asking those questions because they can't be bothered to reach out. They think it's a stupid question. They're embarrassed. They're shy. I mean, the reasons go on and on and on. So if there are questions that your sales team is hearing from prospects, it's important to create content around that. Yeah, and then also looking at your competitors and what they're doing well and making sure that, you know, they're not talking about something that you should also be talking about. So that kind of brings me to the end of my spiel today. We have an ebook that we've created on how tech companies can harness content marketing to connect with their target audience. That's the link for it there, and I'm sure Rich will drop it in the chat as well. But yeah, I believe we're going to take some questions now, so feel free to pop those in the chat. And Rich can, yeah, direct them to Steve or myself. If there's anything you want to know, please let us know. We'll be more than happy to answer them.
Brilliant. Thanks, Catherine. That was great. And thank you everyone who sent questions in as well. There's been tons coming my way and some really good ones. I had a couple of general questions around whether this session will be available afterwards. The answer is yes. We're recording it today, and we'll be emailing the link out to you, and we'll be hosting it on sopro.io as well. And Catherine, I presume you may even be hosting it your side as well. So we've had a few questions. I'll start with the questions we've got for Steve, and then we'll move over to you, Catherine, if that's okay. The first question came in from Dixon Franklin, who asked, what tools are best practice for B2B email marketing? So Steve, have you got an answer for that one?
The struggle with answering that one is, as part of our SoPro journey, was to look at existing options out there, decide we didn't like any of them, build our own. So when we send emails, we have our own internal system we created, and we link it in with, well, actually, that's another very large or broad subject I could go into, but we tend to link here Gmail email accounts with a firing mechanism rather than a system itself. If you look at MailChimp, you can't prospect through something like MailChimp because they go, well, where's the opt-in consent? You don't need the opt-in consent, but they're just, you know, they have certain rules. So in terms of email sending tools, I couldn't give you an answer for that. We do, if we think about the ways we find emails, again, we looked at tools, didn't like them, built our own. But I would say you need to find something if you're going to send emails anyway, that you can connect in with an inbox and it will handle the scheduling and firing of those emails. What you don't necessarily want to do is have a platform that does it all itself, because sometimes you can be lumped in with other companies sending reputations, domains, IPs, and that can have a damaging effect. So if you're doing it yourself, you could have a very efficient copy and paste version of it. But yeah, I would say find a tool that you can link in with your standard email account and have it firing them off. Sorry, that's not a complete answer there. It's just that we build our own stuff rather than use existing ones. So I haven't got experience of what the best ones are out there.
I think it comes down to that age-old tool versus service debate, and we sit firmly on the side of service when it comes to sending emails at scale. While you were answering that question, actually, Annabelle Torrey said just about email tools, she'd like to target the NHS, but of course they have a lot of blockers on their emails, and she's currently using HubSpot. Perhaps you could tell me a little bit about how you'd be able to target people in particular sectors.
Well, there's lots of email technology that stops certain types of emails coming through, and you can't. There's no solution to avoid that. It's a bit like asking about, how do I not go into spam? Now, you can do everything to avoid spam, but there's no magic thing that will stop you ever going into somebody's spam inbox. We do identify NHS email addresses, and we do have successful outreach going to them. So if there are blockers, sometimes they have things that send back and they go, can you verify you're a human before it will get delivered, in which case you can just do and send it through. But if they've got blockers on external emails coming from any business or anything that's not an NHS email, then you're not going to be able to circumvent that. So you would then need to apply a different route into that target market. For example, you could try and connect with them on LinkedIn. We don't like doing that because it's just a bit of a way of prospecting. You can't always find a solution for what the end client has set up in regards to their IT infrastructure.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good answer. Thanks, Steve. We've had another question from Dixon, who wanted to know about personalised videos, and if you've got any thoughts on how they received an email and at what stage of the initial or perhaps the follow-up you'd look to send one.
Yeah, definitely got opinion on video in email, and my opinion is do it. I have got my own personal struggle right now that. I don't really do direct sales for Sopra anymore, but when I would send my proposal with a personalized video explaining it. Can I get my sales team to do it? Not for love nor toffee. It depends how comfortable you feel in front of the camera. Now, in terms of where you do it in the pipeline, I've tested prospecting video emails, and I would say that the response is not worth the effort, because it takes a lot longer than you think to record a load of personalized video emails, because you might do one halfway through, you go, oh, I'm going to scrap that and start again. So you often find yourself going, I'm going to whack out 20 of these in an hour, and then you find yourself doing 4, and then you send your contacts to those 4 people, and you might have one of those emails bounces, waste of time, and the other one of them gets opened, the other 2 don't, and you get ignored. So effort to result, I wouldn't prospect with them, but as soon as you're engaged with somebody, I would absolutely encourage the use of videos embedded in your emails, or even a link to them, because people really like them.
Brilliant, thanks, Steve. And I hope that answers your question. We've got a really good question here from Eleanor Levy, who's asked, how do you cope with GDPR regulations when sending these emails to prospects? So it's a good question. Steve, compliance and GDPR, how does that work with Sopra?
Could give you a very broad answer. GDPR is a EU regulation or a European regulation, the unification of all data protection laws. As such, it's a minimum requirement, and some countries add extra layers on if they want to make them stronger or bolster them. If I stick to the UK, in fact, actually, if we just look at GDPR as a whole, there is a reason you can contact people without consent. Well, there's a number, but the one we use is legitimate interest. And legitimate interest is broad enough that there's lots of reasons you could argue it's about legitimate interest. So anywhere around Europe, you can say that's why I am sending you an email or processing your data. And then the act of sending the email, they are typically a set of separate rules. in the UK, it's PECR, and PECR make it clear that you can email somebody in a corporate body as long as it's relevant to the company and the person you're contacting. So you can't contact, I don't know, someone in marketing about facilities management because it's not particularly relevant. So you can do it. You need to make sure you have a simple process in place to stop emailing people if they don't want to be contacted. And you need to demonstrate you've researched and looked into GDPR, including a legitimate interest assessment. You've got easy ways for them to opt out if they don't want to necessarily reply to you. It's about having a process in place so that if anything ever happened, you could go, well, here's what I've done based on the rules. And to give you any sort of crumb of comfort, we send millions of emails and we haven't had a single escalation or anything close to a regulator even wanting to speak to us. So if you're sending your own emails, you'll be absolutely fine.
Brilliant, thanks, Steve. I've got two more questions for you, but I'm going to combine them into one so that we can move over to Catherine, because we've got plenty of questions for her to answer, and we're running out of time. But we've got a question come in. I've not heard of SoPro before. Is it fully managed? And is the database UK only? And then also, do you operate on a cost per lead basis?
So yeah, it's fully managed as a service in regards to, we'll find the people, we'll write the emails, we'll do the follow-up, we'll categorize responses, we'll track it all, optimize it. It's all in coordination with the client. So we won't change the content of an email without checking with them first. We want their feedback in terms of what happens next. Did you ask about the database?
Yes,
Sorry.
We asked if it was UK only.
Oh, right, sorry. So no, with the data, we have global. Again, it could be a lot bigger answer. We have company or global company information, which we use to help narrow our search. And we typically find the right people on LinkedIn. So we're only limited to where people are on LinkedIn, which of course is global. And we operate all around the world. We've got clients everywhere. The only place we haven't had clients, I think it's pretty much China and Russia, but everywhere else, most of our countries, we've had clients and prospected into. And what was the question?
Cost per lead.
Cost per lead. No, we don't operate on a cost per lead model. Reason being is that a lead it's a very wide term, and if anything, it's an opinion-based thing. But also the value of a lead, it really depends on what happens next. So our clients, we charge on the amount of work we're doing, and typically the cost per lead tends to fall in line with their expectations. If they've got a 7-figure software enterprise platform, then they're not going to get as many leads as somebody who offers SEO for £3,000-4,000 a month. The average cost per lead is about £50 to £60, but no, we don't want to have any sort of debates with our clients about what is a lead, what isn't a lead. It's better to run this, them get good conversations, then win business from it, and go, actually, this is a channel that works for us.
Fantastic, thanks, Steve. Just like Indiana Jones with the door closing, Dave has just snuck in a question in time before the door slammed shut, and that is, to prospect via email, do you need a dedicated SDR?
No, it replaces an SDR. We plug straight into the salespeople that would pitch, propose, and close. So you don't need an SDR, because if someone wants to hear more, your salesperson can pick it up from there.
Yeah, I think that's the answer there, isn't it? If you don't get a response, it doesn't go anywhere. You try follow up. If it doesn't go anywhere, if you do get a reply, it lands straight into the inbox, and you're able to pick them up directly.
Yeah,
fantastic. So Catherine, couple of questions for you. We've been asked, has the pandemic resulted in any new content marketing trends? You mentioned evergreen content and long form, and I wondered if this has become more popular.
No, not necessarily. Evergreen's always been relevant, because evergreen essentially means like content that is not topical, so content that stays relevant for longer. So for example, what is email prospecting is going to be an evergreen piece of content, because it will be probably still relevant in a year from now. I guess, the one trend that we have seen and that we're continuing to see is, the need for empathy. So to understand who you're talking to and what they're worried about and what they care about. And obviously everybody's kind of been impacted by the pandemic differently. So, talking to them how they need and want to be talked to. At the beginning of the pandemic, we did lots of content around COVID to help businesses kind of navigate it. These days, most businesses have kind of found their feet with it, but we might create an article for like one of our fintech clients if new government regulations come out around bounce back loans or, something like that. But we try to mostly avoid it because if you think long term, in the next, like, COVID is kind of, hopefully, knock on wood, going to go away. So we want to create content that has a bit of a longer shelf life. So we try to handle it relatively carefully, and unless it's specifically a topical article, try to avoid or only mention kind of like, as COVID has changed the world, rather than like focusing on it so much that because the problem with that is that it's only going to remain relevant for so long.
Excellent. That's a great answer. And actually, this question leads quite nicely into it. Somebody asked, you mentioned finding a new angle and standing out from the crowd. How do you approach that? And how do you find a new perspective when you're talking about a subject that's been relatively well trodden?
Yeah, I mean, our clients tend to make it relatively easy for us because most of our clients do really innovative tech or fintech and are doing things differently than what's already out there. If there was lots of content out there, so say like, I think 10 best castles in Scotland has been written about 1,000,000 bajillion times. So I would look at it and do a lot of research to see what's out there. And then, by doing research, only then, and once you understand the landscape, can you find, the content gap or the content hole, and how you can kind of fill that and create something that makes a meaningful impact and offers something different. Or you do an opinionated best piece. So perhaps interviewing, the director of the travel company on what he thinks is the best 10 castles in Scotland, because his opinion is going to be very different than like when you just desk research it.
Brilliant. That's a great answer. Thanks, Catherine. So finally, do you use SoPro yourself, and how's it worked with your business, if you don't mind me asking that one?
Sure, Rich. You know the answer.
I do.
Yeah, I do. I do use SoPro, and it's been pretty amazing. Totally transformed our lead pipeline, and actually the campaign performed so well that we had to turn them off in February. And I met with Simon today, who's my account manager. And we are going to turn them back on in March, but it just went a bit crazy, and I had to say, hey, wait a minute, like. I have to handle all these new clients that we've just gotten through SoPro. Like, let's pause for a minute, and then I can onboard all these clients, and then we can go again. So yes, I have been using them, and I would definitely recommend them.
Nothing beats the recommendation. Thanks, Catherine.
No worries. Didn't realize you were going to put me on the, I volunteered to do a case study because I've been so happy with SoPro, but I didn't expect to be doing one. I didn't expect to be doing one now.
Well, we very much appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you, everybody who's joined us today. We've had some brilliant questions. We've popped a link to Catherine's ebook in the chat. Please do click on that link and have a read. It is absolutely brilliant. We will share this webinar with you afterwards. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, just drop us an email. We've put the contact details for Catherine and Steve and myself in the top of the chat. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with any of us. We'll be happy to answer your questions. And thank you all for coming along today. We're finishing at just 1 minute past, and I think that's a huge success. Thank you, everybody.